Hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Forster, a member of the Board of Trustees and former president of the board of the Center for Hope and Safety, formerly known as Shelter Our Sisters. We are Bergen County's lead nonprofit agency when it comes to helping victims of domestic violence find safety and an opportunity to rebuild their lives free of violence and the fear of violence. I'm here today to welcome and introduce to you the new president of the Board of Trustees, Pete Miragliotta. Pete succeeds Gail Steinell, who served most capably and in a stellar fashion as our president. And we are now looking forward to Pete continuing that strong tradition in the next couple of years. So I will turn it over to Pete now and begin the discussion, the conversation with just a quick question, Pete, to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be involved with the Center for Safety.
Well, thanks a lot, Jeff. I remember when we met at a Bergen volunteer luncheon that they had, and I noticed that you were the then president of the Center for Hope and Safety. And I was interested in the organization because of our background, and I approached you and we talked about that. I'm retired. My wife and I live right now with our 3 grandchildren here in Rutherford. Our story with regard to getting involved with Center for Hope and Safety really started on July 6, 2016, when we lost our daughter Michelle to a domestic violence homicide when her husband murdered her and then proceeded to kill himself. Fortunately, the children were able to escape, and they're safe, and they've been living with us now for the past 4 years. So after some time of reflection and trying to figure out what we would do next, I became interested in the idea of getting involved with the Center for Hope and Safety. I didn't even know at the time that the organization had changed its name from Shelter Our Sisters. We donated a lot of Michelle's clothes to the agency, but by that time, the agency had changed its name to Center for Hope and Safety. So for me and for my wife, Jackie, as an extension, this is a way for us to both honor Michelle's memory and to try to help others who are affected by domestic violence.
Well, Pete, I think I've mentioned this to you before. I'm so touched by your commitment, your courage, your heart in sharing your story, first of all, with all of us, and in supporting the Center for Hope and Safety, and then deciding to get involved yourself, to take that extra step of making a difference through the organization that we together work for. I also think it's incredibly commendable for you to be raising your 3 grandchildren. I can't imagine that it is easy at any point, not to mention during the middle of a pandemic. So kudos to you. But you had mentioned to me before that your concept of what domestic violence is and can be has changed because of your experience, and that a lot of people may not recognize it when it's happening to their own friends, relatives, colleagues. Could you share a little bit about that perspective?
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. You're exactly right. I had a concept that I think is probably very common, that domestic violence involved a lot of physical abuse, that the signs of a person, and we primarily deal with women and children, but sometimes men are involved as well. And I'll probably use the word woman or women because most commonly that's who we deal with. But 1 in 10 men are affected by domestic violence, as are 1 in 4 women. But my concept really had a lot to do with physical abuse and seeing signs of physical abuse. And I've come to learn, sadly, through our experience with Michelle, that it's quite different from what you might expect. It takes many different forms. It almost never starts out as physical abuse, but it can be controlling behavior, financial control, trying to limit what the other person is doing if you're not, if you're not around. It can be belittling the other person, gaslighting them. There's all different ways that domestic violence can manifest itself. In Michelle's case, her husband suffered from serious mental illness. He had lifelong depression, and he was completely dependent upon her. And I know that she felt very obligated to stay with him and to support him, because without her, no one knows what would have eventually happened to him. There had never been any physical abuse in the marriage, although I learned through a book that I read a year or so ago called No Visible Bruises by Rachel Louise Snyder, of different types of behavior that I now recognize. Narcissism, a lot of yelling, breaking things in the house, significant temper, but not with the physical abuse. And I recognize all of these in our son-in-law. And I now recognize that some women that I have known in my life were very likely suffering from domestic abuse. And I've also come to realize that it's not people who are weak. There are people that you would consider to be very strong, very self-reliant, who fall victim to this as well. So I've come to say to people that everybody knows somebody who's affected by domestic violence. It just may not be very obvious to you.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I happen to have the book here. You introduced it to me, No Visible Bruises, What We Don't Know About Domestic Violence Can Kill Us, by Rachel Louise Snyder. It is quite compelling, and I learned a lot. So thank you for sharing with me, and maybe others can learn from it as well. It's true that a lot of domestic violence takes many different forms, many of which we don't recognize. What everybody who's suffering through domestic violence experiences has in common is that they need help. And that's what we're here for.
Right.
The Center for Hope and Safety really is trying to accomplish two main goals at this point in our history. Been around for 44 years, but we still need to increase awareness that domestic violence is something that happens. Yes, right here in Bergen County. And we also need to let people know that we're here to help. As you mentioned, a lot of people still know us as Shelter Our Sisters, and we changed our name a few years ago for reasons that we'll get into. But it's very important for us to communicate the fact that we can help in many different ways across the whole spectrum of services that people who are in crisis can benefit from. Right. So that's part of the message that we want to get out today. And my question for you now is to ask, what do you think most people need to know about Center for Hope and Safety? And feel free to talk about anything and everything that is currently on our plate.
And there's a lot, right? I mean, we are the go-to organization in Bergen County to cover virtually, to address, I should really say, virtually every aspect of domestic abuse or domestic violence. I know the popular term nationally is domestic violence. I've always preferred to use domestic abuse because I think the word violence implies physical violence, and as we discussed, that's not always the case, whereas abuse is much broader. That's just my personal preference. But as you mentioned, the organization changed its name several years ago from Shelter Our Sisters to Center for Hope and Safety to reflect the fact that we really moved away from being primarily a shelter for women who had to get away from their abusers to, and we still have, of course, the safe house and transitional housing for women and for children who are getting back on their feet. But we provide a whole array of services, to help people become self-sufficient. Financial counseling, counseling for children, art programs, music programs. We have so much going on in our community center. We now offer legal services, which I guess we've had now for a couple of years. And that's a major boon to women and men that are affected by domestic violence and don't necessarily know where to turn if they need to get a restraining order or something like that. I know Michelle at one point considered getting a restraining order, and she got as far as the courthouse and turned around and came home. And if there had been someone there to guide her, she might have proceeded with that. That was well before anything, before we lost her. But still in all, I wish that she had been aware, of that particular service. I think one of the most important services that we provide is our 24-hour, 7-day-a-week hotline that anyone can call with a question about domestic violence, whether they suspect that what their experience is domestic violence or someone they know is experiencing domestic violence. It doesn't have to just be someone who's looking for immediate shelter. They may be looking for guidance in terms of legal issues or some counseling in terms of how, for example, to formulate an escape plan. Julie Miner, our executive director, has mentioned to me several times that the most dangerous place for a domestic violence victim is in his or her own home. And the most dangerous time is when they are trying to leave. And calling that hotline and talking to a qualified counselor there can certainly help work that through. In addition to that, if someone's in a real emergency situation and they really feel that it's life-threatening to them or to someone else, they should call 911. They should involve the police immediately.
Great, thank you. Just wanted to go back to the point you made about the name change, because Shelter Our Sisters was a very popular and well-known name, but we felt that we needed to emphasize the fact that we do more than shelter. It all begins with shelter for many people who need a safe place to go at a time when they are in harm's way. That has not changed. We're still very much committed to providing that safe haven, a roof over one's head, away from the abuser, primarily women and children, as you mentioned. So that part remains a core element of our mission. But as you noted, we're doing so much more. We've started that legal program of not just legal advice, but actually legal representation for people who are trying to get restraining orders or help with immigration issues or custody and divorce cases. So there's a broad range of services that are available to people in the community who may need shelter immediately, but maybe they don't. And if they don't, they still may need services of some kind, as you so well expressed. The other reason we changed our name was to indicate that children, when we say Shelter Our Sisters, it doesn't really convey the fact that 50% of our clients are women, are children.
Right.
We have children's programs for those who are living at the safe house or in transitional housing. We also have programs for children who are in the community but have witnessed and been traumatized by domestic violence in their homes. And Project Child is an excellent art and music therapy program for kids that really helps restore their sense of self and enables them to cope with everything that they've been going through. So those are two of the main reasons why we changed our name. We still need to get the name change out there, but what really hasn't changed is the devotion to the mission and now the expansion of that mission to many, many different kinds of services.
Definitely.
Now, we're in the middle of a pandemic at the moment, and I think it would be fair to say, if you read the newspapers and listen to the reports, that this is a time of great peril for people who are potential victims of domestic violence, because people are spending more time in their home. The opportunities to get out and to seek help may be somewhat limited. And there may be some reluctance on the part of victims to go somewhere other than home during this time when we've all been advised to shelter in place.
Correct.
But I know that the center has done many things to deal with the pandemic, and I thought maybe you'd like to describe a number of those approaches that have been taken to make sure everyone stays safe, secure, and healthy.
Thanks. I hope I can remember them all because it's a lot. When I talk to Julie Miner, our executive director, I'm kind of blown away by the complexity of all of the things that we've had to do to keep our active clients, particularly in our safe house and our transitional housing, safe relative to COVID. But the other sort of major thing or major phenomenon really that occurred, not just here in Bergen County, but throughout the state, and I suspect nationally, was that in particular, at the height of people being quarantined in their own homes, the number of calls about domestic violence to police departments and to domestic violence agencies, including our own, went way down, dropped by 50% or more. If you think about it, the people who are affected by domestic violence are living with their abuser, and the very aspects of the whole COVID shelter in place thing exacerbated the conditions. People might have been laid off from their job. They might have been worried about money. They're closed up in close quarters and can't get away from each other. And so the irony, I guess, for lack of a better word, is that the amount of domestic violence actually increased, but the calls to organizations like ours and police actually went down. It seems that as we've taken on a concerted effort to communicate to the community what they could do to get help, we've set up even a special program in cooperation with police departments where women and children could get out of their home, have a policeman or a policewoman there to help them and get them to our shelter or to some type of assistance. That those calls have increased again, and we are seeing a larger population in our safe house. We've had to house some women and children in hotels because some of them are essential workers and had to continue going to their jobs, and we had to create an environment where they wouldn't be coming in and out of the safe house and potentially infecting people that are already there. We had to set up a whole series of protocols going in and out of the safe house in terms of changing their clothes as soon as they came in, for example, bathing. Sorry about that phone. Let me turn that off. We've had to create a whole series of protocols within the safe house to safeguard everyone who's there. For example, the way that people coming in will immediately need to change their clothes and take a shower, reschedule meal times so that you don't have multiple people sharing the kitchen at the same time while they're preparing food. Many private individuals and organizations have donated a lot of food to folks living in the safe house and transitional housing. People are normally very generous in this regard, but we've seen it really increase. So there's really been a lot, and happy to say that we haven't had, for people who are in the safe house or our transitional housing, even one documented infection of COVID-19, and that's a testament to all of the precautions that have been put in place, as well as our staff's adherence and our clients' adherence to those particular protocols.
Great, thank you. I have to think.
I think my phone ringing took us off our train of thought.
Yeah, no, that's okay. The message that we're trying to communicate throughout the pandemic is, as Pete noted, our doors are open. our services haven't been curtailed at all. Some of the counseling sessions have been converted to virtual.
That's right.
The legal team is still very much engaged in advocacy for clients. Some of those courtroom experiences are now virtual, but the Safe House is open, the transitional housing is open, the programs are operating, and like many other organizations that are dealing with the pandemic, our folks have been very resourceful in adapting to a new situation and trying to make it possible for all of our programs and services to be delivered to people at a time when everything seems to have been turned upside down in the world around us. I give great credit to Julie and the staff for their devotion and dedication, in addition to the safety protocols that have been implemented, which are extensive and in line with all CDC and state and local requirements. So it's very important for people to know that we are here. We have not taken a step back in any way, shape, or form. We're going full tilt, and we're here to help people. One of the things that we want to emphasize and help folks understand is how do you go about getting help? And you might want to talk about that. You can go into the hotline in a little more detail, Pete, if you'd like to.
Yeah, I mean, so the primary way that I advise people when they tell me that they know someone who's affected by domestic violence or they suspect is to call the hotline, because those people, those counselors who pick up the phone when you call, again, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, are qualified to understand the types of questions to ask, to find out what your particular situation, and to make a determination if you need to get into shelter immediately, if you should call the police, if you need a referral for some of our legal services, for example. And now is probably a good time to mention that hotline number, which, as I said, is always staffed. And that phone number is 201-944-9600. That's 201-944-9600. And that's the one number that I ever give out to people to call, rather than to try to think, well, based on what you're describing, I think you need to call this department or that department within the organization. Your best bet is to call that hotline number, speak with someone there, and let them direct you in terms of where you would best be served. And of course, as I said before, if it's a real immediate physical emergency, call 911 and get that type of help from the police. And, we do a lot of work to communicate with the police agencies in Bergen County so that they understand domestic violence and so that they respond swiftly and appropriately when they get that type of a call.
Great. Thanks, Pete. I would also direct people to the Center for Hope and Safety website, which is hopeandsafetynj.org, which has a lot of detail on all of the programs and services that we've been talking about here, and also indicate how people can be of help, which we'll get to next. But I encourage everybody to explore hopeandsafetynj.org. And on social media, we are very active, very busy on Facebook, Instagram, and other social media channels, telling our story. And we are working very hard to get the word out that way. And in the pre-pandemic area, we had made a lot of public appearances. Our staff would go out and speak to community groups. We still do that when we can, but we're very much interested in meeting people, connecting with organizations, schools, churches, civic clubs, businesses, everyone out there who's in a position to help educate the public about domestic violence in Bergen County, and to just increase awareness.
That's right.
Could be somebody that you know, somebody that you love who is in danger.
Yeah.
So visit the website, check out social media, and find us. That's why we're here. If you can talk a little bit about, Pete, about how people can help. It's one of the tabs on the website, but not just financially, but through volunteer efforts. We are eager and willing to get any kind of assistance we can from the friends we have in the community.
Well, that's true. And I think that, you know, at least in broad strokes, you covered it, right? We're a nonprofit agency. Donations to our organization, to the extent that you're eligible for them, are tax deductible. While we receive government funds, a lot of times, actually most times, those government funds are very specific in terms of how that money may be used for what specific programs and services. And private donations that we receive to our general fund are really helpful. They help us in terms of expanding our services in new and better ways. So we are, like most nonprofit organizations, very reliant on that. At this particular time, with the whole thing that's going on with COVID, limiting our activities, we've become even more reliant on people providing donations, because some of our natural funding sources from things like our annual gala or our annual golf outing, were somewhat curtailed. So I don't mean to just talk about money, but certainly every nonprofit organization, and we're no exception, needs to continuously receive the revenue that we get from such generous donors, so that we can continue and grow our services. In addition to that, volunteering, for the organization, again, during COVID, somewhat limited, but people who are interested in our mission should still contact our organization and talk to our volunteer coordinator and see where services may be required. Some people may have special skills that they can offer. I know someone who's a yoga instructor, whose classes I've been to, and it turned out she herself is a survivor of domestic violence. I never would have guessed it unless she had told me, because she's such a strong, resilient person. And she is interested in volunteering her services to provide yoga classes for our clients. So there are all kinds of ways that people could chip in. Now might be a good time to mention, we're in September, we're coming up on October, that October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And during the month of October, every year, we have our candlelight vigil at Vanstone Park. On our walk, and we have a walk there that we have bricks that people can dedicate to people living or deceased. We dedicated a brick to our daughter Michelle there last year, I think it was. We also have our annual walk against domestic violence in October. And that's another great way for people to come out and show their support for our organization and our clients and the work that we do, but also to support us financially. And we do that every year as well. So as Jeff mentioned, going to the website, you can see plenty of opportunities there. A lot of information about the organization and our services. And that's a great place to sign up to come to our walk, or to get the information on the vigil, and to come there as well. Besides the fact that this year we'll have opportunities for people to participate virtually if they're not comfortable doing that in person.
I'm glad that you mentioned all of the activities in October for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We do those every October, and you can learn more about them by going to the website. And you can also learn more about how you can help us, whether through a financial donation or for volunteering your time and effort. We are so grateful for all of the help that we've received from friends in the community, from individuals and organizations, the outpouring of thoughtfulness and kindness, especially at this time, has been very, very heartwarming.
Yes.
I know the board and the staff appreciates it deeply as well. The board, we're all volunteers as well. So we understand how much the volunteer spirit is important to the workings of the organization. But please pay a visit and learn as much as you can. And as Pete said, please come and join us at our October events. We do events at other times of the year as well. There's just any number of ways to express your support for the organization. And we do receive government funds, but those are never guaranteed. We receive some support from federal, state, and local governments, but what we really want to do is ensure that we have a very strong core of support from our friends and neighbors here in Bergen County.
Absolutely.
That's one thing we know that we can depend upon, and we are extremely grateful for everything that we receive from them. Pete, what do you think you want to emphasize in closing? And is there anything that we haven't covered? Are there thoughts that from your own personal experience or from your new perspective as president of the board that you would like to share?
Well, that's a great question. I think we've covered a lot in terms of giving people a good idea of what the agency is and who we serve. I think the thing that I would like to emphasize is to really try to open up, to broaden your understanding of what might constitute domestic violence. There's not one economic strata. There are no particular racial or ethnic groups that are either, more subject to domestic violence or immune from it. The woman that I mentioned earlier was in a marriage where her husband was very wealthy. They lived in a huge house. They had lots and lots of money. She had no physical bruises. But what people on the outside didn't realize is she was only given a small amount of money each week, for example, to buy groceries. She had to let her husband know where she was going and who she was with. And if she was out for too long, he'd be following up with her. So it's important to understand, especially in a place like Bergen County where we are, which is relatively wealthy, that your income doesn't make you immune. I think the other thing is that we do offer a very broad array of services. Our staff is very dedicated and very talented, and that we really can help people who are affected by domestic violence. And if someone doesn't really think, they don't like the word victim, they don't really think of themselves as a victim, but they know something is wrong, they should call the agency. They should call that hotline number and talk to a counselor and see if there are some services or that we can provide or some guidance that we can give them to help. No one should live in this situation without reaching out and seeking some guidance and some help if they can.
Well said, Pete. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for joining us. And please direct any questions to our hotline. Be in touch with us through the website. Find us on social media. Just find us and know how much we care and how much we're committed to ending domestic violence in Bergen County and beyond. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Jeff.